Hello lovely people and welcome to my first ever tutorial. I've postponed this for so long, having my doubts if I am ready or not. Am I a good artist as I'm self-taught? But you know what? If I've learned something, it's always better to share it, as some of you may learn from my experience. So let's paint a pear. If you're new here, hi, I'm Radost, a self-taught artist working mainly with watercolors, and would love to share my art journey with you. For this project you'll need thick watercolor paper. This is my hahnemühle watercolor book, a light pencil, eraser, round brushes. I use these three, one large, one medium and one small for the details. Watercolor palette, a jar of water and some paper towel. Let's start with the sketch. As we are going to work with watercolors, pick up some lighter pencil like H or HB to avoid the harsh lines. I prefer to leave the lines to guide me, but don't want them to be very visible. The sketch is the part where I try to be most concentrated and give myself more time. Here's the moment to be completely honest with you. My main idea was to find a pear with leaves and paint it from life, but I couldn't, so I found some pictures instead, which is okay. Here are the pictures of the same object, I believe, but a little bit different, so we'll combine them together. For the body of the pear, easier way to draw it is to start from a circle and continue these lines here, forming a cone. Bear in mind that the references are for inspiration and guidance. We can always improvise. During the sketch, watching the reference and right after, I normally think about the colors and values. Where are the darkest places on the pear, on the leaves, but also where are the highlights? I really love the contrast between the edges of the object and the highlights. It creates somehow realistic picture, if that makes sense. Let's choose our colors now. You can do some swatches on the paper you're using or on a different piece of paper like I did here. I mentally divided our pear into three parts: pear, leaves and the pedicel or stem, as it will be easier for me to pick the colors that I'm going to need for each of them. Of course, you can play with the colors and improvise if you know well your palette. I'm using my Winsor & Newton professional palette, and here are the colors that I picked. For the pear I chose Winsor Lemon. Basically every cold yellow will do the job, I believe. Olive green, sap green, as there are some spots on our pear, some brown dots. Raw umber and Van Dyke brown will do the job. For the shadowy parts, especially down there and on the left, I'm going to use Payne's Grey. For the leaves, I've picked olive green, sap green, hooker's green and Payne's Grey. For the stem we need some browns. My choice is raw umber, burnt umber, Van Dyke brown, and some Payne's Grey and black to intensify the shadows. And no, I'm not scared to use black, but you can avoid it by using just Payne's Grey. Let's commence with the fun part, the coloring. At first I'm going to start with the pear by wetting the surface, as I'm going to use wet on wet technique here. Lay the lighter color you've picked for the pear, in my case lemon yellow, and observe how it spreads, creating soft edges around the highlight. Be careful not to paint over the highlights. My advice is to be really gentle with the washes to avoid that. Wait for it to dry or help yourself with the hairdryer. As it's humid and not really warm where I live, I almost always use a hairdryer. Wet the surface again and prepare the olive green color. Watch your reference closely and spread the color. You can dab the brush to create this effect of uneven surface to create texture. Be careful with the highlights though. As you can see, there is an area under the pedicel which is also pretty light, so we can leave it to be yellowish there. You can soften the edges with clean dry brush while the surface is still wet. Our next color is going to be sap green. I like to mix it with the olive green for softer transition. It helps me to imagine how it will look if I layer some more of the color. When you wet the surface, be careful not to lift any color, as the olive green can be easily lifted. Like I said, be gentle. If you want to lift any excess color though, you can always do that while it's still wet with some paper towel or dry brush. When we start with the darker colors, bear in mind that we should focus on the outer corners of the pear, where are our shadows. The most darker the color of the pear is at the bottom and upper left. Be careful, but whatever happens, try to enjoy the process. That's one of the lessons I've learned on my creative journey. To strengthen the contrast and create the shadow on the bottom, I'm going to use Payne's Grey. I'll try to be careful with it as it can be really dark. Also, if it seems like you need one more layer, wait till it's dry to be able to see how it actually looks and then make the decision if you need it or not. You can go back into some areas where you might need some green. Don't worry to do so. Let's wet our surface again to be able to create these soft transitions between the colors. But remember to do it when it's completely dry to avoid some blooms in the already colored areas. For the brownish looking dots, I recommend mixing Van Dyke Brown and Payne's Grey, as the brown is quite warm. It will just look more natural corresponding to the colors we've already used. And for some lighter brown areas, I use raw umber. Make sure to wet the surface before for creating a softer look. If not, with slightly wet brush, almost dry, soften the edges. Let's do the pedicel or the stem, however you'd like to call it, and leave the leaves for the last. Bear in mind the highlight here at the center above the pear. The darkest part is again on the left, where is the shadow. Let's wet the whole stem, and then I recommend you to use a smaller brush for more precision. First layer I'd like to make with raw umber, and while it's still wet, add some Van Dyke Brown on the edges. When it's dry, wet again gently. Try not to go out of the lines and then add the darker layer. I'm going to mix the Van Dyke Brown with some black. Try to leave some highlighting points also. And the final touch will be with more black in the brown-black mixture for the shadows on the left. You can do that on dry surface if you'd like more precision. Let's go to the leaves. For me, they're always the hardest part. This one on the left. The lighter color I'm going to use here will be olive green, but we'll try to leave the vein white. With a light wash of the olive green, I'll paint this twisted part of the leaf, and after it's dry, we'll start with the other areas. Now let's go to this area right here. While wetting the surface, if you work that way, try to avoid the vein, as we want it to stay white, or if not possible, really light wash of olive green. And this olive green will be again the first color, and then I gradually will build the other two greens. You can continue working while the olive green is still wet. If it dries out, wait for it to dry completely and then wet the surface again, very gently. I'm also trying to hint these other veins by leaving lighter areas or lifting some of the paint with the clean brush. Over the years, I've developed this love for brighter and darker colors and high contrast in my paintings, which is not typical for watercolors. And you can see this while I'm forming the leaf here. If that's not up to your street, you can leave it with the previous layer. For the darkest part of the leaf, I will use a mix of Hooker's green and Payne's grey. I'm not going for complete realism here, but definitely having fun with the colors and their fluidity. I enjoy working wet on wet these days. The colors can spread really unpredictable sometimes, but this is somehow liberating and makes the picture unique. For the other leaf, I'm going to use more loose approach, trying to follow these values of course. The shadow is at the bottom of the leaf near the stem. I'm trying to layer my darker greens in the lower area of the leaf, and where this creates unnatural edges, I just go over them with my semi-dry brush. The color is mixture between sap green and Hooker's green with some Payne's grey at the bottom. For some precision, you might darken up this part here as well. Here's our pear. If you followed along or got inspired to paint your own version, tag me on Instagram. I go by Catspirational well there. It will be like we've painted this together. Hope you enjoyed this, but before you go, as this was my first tutorial, tell me how it was. Did I miss something? I really want to improve my art skills, but also to help other artists, so your feedback is highly appreciated. Stay creative, my friends. Bye!